Hello everyone, I hope you can hear me. We're pretty much ready to go. I'll just give it a tiny bit longer just in case anyone else is still logging on. For those that are watching, my name is Professor Catherine Loveday. I'm from the University of Westminster, but I'm also a trustee for Age UK Barnet. So I've been asked today to answer some questions about dementia, about well-being, about stress, and all of this is in aid of Mental Health Awareness Week, because that's where we are at the moment. I've never done anything like this before, so I've got no idea whether things are working or not working, but I'm getting some messages in now to suggest that they are, so fingers crossed. So I thought I would start off by talking about the theme for this Mental Health Awareness Week, which is kindness. And I think it can be a difficult thing sometimes to really think about what we mean about kindness. It seems obvious, but actually in the sort of psychological world, what we are talking about really is acts of kindness. So doing something kind, and that can be really small. It doesn't have to be something huge. It can be as simple as opening the door for somebody, having a conversation and really taking the time to listen to what somebody has to say. It can also include maybe just putting something in the post to somebody, or it can be paying into a charity. So any of these things, all of these sorts of things would be counted as acts of kindness. And one of the reasons why the Mental Health Foundation have chosen this as their theme is because we know that being kind to somebody is not only good for them and makes us feel better if people are kind to us, but actually it also is good for us to do something kind. So if we do something kind for somebody else, it makes us feel almost as good as it does themselves. I think a survey was run, it was over 4,000 adults actually, and they found that around 63-64% of people agreed that when somebody did something kind for them, it really boosted their mental well-being. But what was really interesting is that they found the same number of people felt good and had better well-being by being kind to somebody else. So that's why they've chosen their theme. Obviously, it's not always that easy to be kind to people. I mean that it's not easy in the sense that we aren't always in a position to be able to do something kind, and it's particularly hard in some ways at the moment where we can't go out and about and do the same sorts of things. The other thing is, so we know from the research that being kind to other people is nice for them. It's nice when people are kind to us, but it's also good for us to be kind and to do something kind, however small that might be. And it's really quite fascinating to show that, and this is probably the other reason the Mental Health Foundation have chosen this theme, is that we tend to carry out more acts of kindness and reach out more when we're under times of stress. So the more stressed we are, in many cases, the more we reach out to be kind to people. And some people think this is a kind of trade-off thing. They've called it tend and befriend. So if we reach out to people and do something kind to them, then people are more likely to be kind back to us. So that's really where the theme of kindness came from. It is a kind of evidence-based thing that is good for us. But I think the other really key thing is about being kind to ourselves. And there's a huge evidence base that it's really, really important to be kind to ourselves as well. So it's not just about being kind to other people. It's trying to take that same principle and apply it to ourselves. So sometimes one of the ways this can be done is to imagine that you are somebody that you really care about. I mean, hopefully you are somebody that you really care about, but is to imagine that you're somebody that you really care about, and what would you do for them? What would you like somebody to do for you? And then to try and do that for yourself. So finding ways to be kind to yourself. So if, for example, you would say to a friend, okay, it's really important that you have a rest and that you take some time out and that you do something nice for yourself, then you need to apply that same logic to yourself. Okay, so that's the theme of kindness. I'm going to just look at some of the questions that I've had in advance here. So we've got quite a lot we've got a couple of questions around people being anxious about what's going to happen when they do go out again, and also people who are anxious about not going out again. So I think I will address both of those together in a second. But I thought I would just start off by picking up on a couple of questions that really came out of the video that I made to help support people through dementia. So one of the questions was, why is sleep so important for people for dementia? And the other is, why is routine so important? And I'm going to take those together because they're actually quite well linked, actually. So in terms of why sleep is important, now, essentially, sleep is important for all of us. Absolutely. One of the most important kind things that we can do to ourselves is to allow ourselves the opportunity to sleep properly. Now, I know people have all sorts of sleep problems, and there is some good tips on Age UK Barnet's website for how you can sort of try and address some of those sleeping problems. But routine is one of the ways that we can help people with sleep. But what I wanted to explain really is why sleep is important. And there are two things that make it particularly important for people with dementia, but are also hugely important for anyone who's getting older, and as I say, all of us to some extent. So the key thing is that there are two really, really important things that happen when we sleep. One of them is that it's the time that we consolidate our memories. So we know this from absolutely loads and loads of research. If you disrupt people's sleep, you have an impact the next day on their memory for what happened the day before. So one way to solidify our memories is to sleep a bit more. And if we're trying to learn something, we're trying to learn skills or trying to learn information, or if we simply want to remember a really nice day we've had with a friend or a film we've watched, sleep is the key to that. So sleep is very, very important for memory. It's also, secondly, very, very important for brain health. So one of the things that happens during sleep is that we have this kind of cleansing process. And there are there's this amazing kind of washing process that happens when we're asleep. And it's something that we've only really began to understand in the last few years. And a lot of the research has been done on rodents, but there's increased research on humans as well now. And one of the reasons this is particularly important in dementia is that one of the causes of dementia is a build-up of amyloid plaques. These are kind of lumps of stuff that are particularly unhelpful that build up in brains. Now they build up in all of our brains, but there is a much higher number of these in people with dementia. Now they cause problems. They stop the brain from working as well as it should. And one of the really interesting things is that we've seen that cleansing process happens overnight, and it gets rid of those amyloid plaques. So we have this kind of circular thing going on, which is that if people aren't sleeping properly, then it's destroying more parts of the brain. There's a bit more of a build-up of these plaques in the brain. And then, unfortunately, one of the areas of the brain that gets affected is the area that controls sleep. So we go round and round and round in circles. So one of the reasons that sleep is incredibly important is to have this cleansing process and to try and save as much of the brain as we can from these plaques. And so this comes back to routine now. So one of the reasons that routine is particularly important is because of routine helps us sleep. Basically, the better our routine, the more reliable our routine, the better we sleep. Simple as that. So if we have a very, very regular routine, then sleeping is better, eating is better, people are more likely to remember to take their medication, life is more predictable, there are fewer kind of big surprises. So there's lots of reasons that routine is really, really good for us, but sleep is sort of right at the top of that list, I think. I'm just going to check whether I've got any other questions coming in. Okay, so the next question I had was, what kind of activities would I suggest that people with dementia might want to do at home? So the answer to this is it's not a simple answer because people vary hugely. So for some people, something as simple as maybe colouring in something that's really engaging, something that is very present, that doesn't require huge intellectual effort or huge cognitive effort, but it gives you something to kind of concentrate and focus on, almost a kind of meditative experience, something that absorbs you and draws you in. And the reason that that's good, again, it's something that's good for all of us, is because it doesn't rely on the memory system. It kind of allows us to just be present. And being present and being engaged, really sort of thoroughly engaged in an activity, kind of saves us from a lot of the anxieties that come from trying to mind wander when the mind wandering system isn't working so well. So when the memory system is disrupted, the mind wandering system is disrupted, which means it can feel a bit chaotic. So something that really engages somebody is good. Now, that's going to vary hugely. So something that's very absorbing. I know people who really enjoy playing solitaire, a game of patience, or who play cards with another person, but a game that they know really well and they can play very automatically. Some people still enjoy doing crosswords, playing Scrabble, maybe even playing Scrabble online with people, knitting, any of the kind of really automatic skills. And I guess the other thing that's really interesting is that the skills that last the longest are the ones that were kind of learnt the earliest and that were the most robust. So if somebody, for example, was a brilliant violin player, then getting the violin out might be a really good thing to do. I know people who still go out and play tennis, for example, because they were really great tennis players and they can do that very automatically. I mean, again, at the moment, that's not particularly easy, but the point is, it's the activities that people feel most comfortable with are going to be the ones that they have done the longest and in many ways were the best at. So those are the kind of activities, and it really is trial and error. And of course, some days some things will feel right, and other days other things will feel right. We've also looked at ways of reminiscing. So one of the interesting things about reminiscence is that if we go back far enough, it goes to the parts of memory that are generally a bit more solid. So in dementia, very often there are many parts of memory that are still there. Some memories do seem to kind of go completely, but the older memories are more resilient, they're more reliable. Childhood memories, memories from teenage years, and so on. And we find this really, really consistently. And so that's probably a kind of more comfortable activity, is to reminisce far back. And that's why we have things like reminiscence therapy. But often people don't really know practically how can they actually do this. What can they do to actually kind of evoke this reminiscence? And we know that there's lots of obvious things like watching old films and listening to old music, and that can be really great. But I think it's also about having conversations and not worrying if those conversations maybe go off at a bit of a tangent. Let them kind of go where they're going to go. But we've also found what can be really useful is using triggers. So music, as I've said, is great, but actually old photos are really good, but even objects. So finding photos of or pictures of objects from a long time ago, or even just picking up things that are lying around the house that might have real significance, that have been around for a very, very long time, and asking a person, what that object was for, what role did it play, or sharing memories about it together if it's something that you had together. So reminiscence is really helpful. And if people like writing, again, none of these things are specific to dementia. They are things that would be kind of helpful and useful for all of us in many ways. But the one of the things about reminiscence, is that if we can write things down, then there's a sort of more of a continuity. So if somebody is comfortable writing, then that might really, really be something worth trying. Getting them to write about things that were really important to them or useful to them. Or the other thing is recording people's stories. We've really enjoyed doing that sometimes, is recording the stories and then kind of going back to them and being able to use those as kind of triggers for conversations later on. Okay, so I've got a couple more questions here. So one of the things that I'm just checking whether there's any more questions, not at the moment. So oh, hang on, just checking this isn't another question coming in. No. Okay, so I'm just going to keep an eye on that in case any more come in on my phone instead of on the computer. If you do have a question, you can, I think, type it over on the right hand side of the screen. That should work. Okay, so let me just find this other question that I had. So this is the more complex question, I think, and it's connected. So one of the things is that Age UK Barnet, I know, have spoken to a lot of people who are really scared about going out again, about when it's okay to go out and what it's going to feel like. And having been in some ways in a very sort of safe environment and a very predictable environment, what's the world going to look like? And if you are somebody who hasn't been out at all, it does look a little bit different. You know, the shops look different. There's lots of perspex sort of screens up to protect people. Lots of people are wearing masks, and I think that can be quite unsettling. If you know, for those of us who've maybe been going out regularly once or twice a week to do our shopping or whatever, that we've probably got used to that. But if you haven't been out at all and you suddenly go out now, I think you would find it a bit disconcerting, a bit unusual. So I guess the first thing I want to say about this, because it is because it kind of relates to the other thing as well, is that obviously safety and well-being are kind of number one considerations here. Now, safety is easy. We know that less contact is safer at the moment until we kind of understand more about the virus and how we can use vaccinations and vaccinations being in place. We know that less contact is safer. But well-being is a bit less clear-cut, because isolation might keep us safer in terms of the virus, but it brings its own challenges, and these are really very real challenges. We are, as human beings, we're not particularly good at being on our own. It's not something that we naturally do. And I know that the people that I've spoken to, you know, people certainly over 70, people over 70 who've really hardly been going out at all, without fail, the two things that have been most worrying and upsetting them is not seeing their family, particularly grandchildren, and not being able to do their own shopping. And actually, they're both really, really fundamental things. I mean, human company with our family and eating are two really, really fundamentally important things for us to be able to do. So some people are very anxious about not being able to do that. And some people are very anxious about what it's going to feel like when they can do that again. So I think, I mean, there's lots of ways around this. I think I want to start off by just responding to the question about people who are scared about what it's going to be like when they go back out again. So in that case, I think one of the things is, first of all, you have to decide yourself when you feel like it's okay for you to go outside again. And when you do that, I think you need to make sure you're very clear of what the risks are and how to keep yourself safe while you're out and about. And I'm sure many of you are very in contact with what these rules are, but making sure that you keep your distance, that you wash your hands before you go out and as soon as you come back, that you try not to touch things. And if you're doing all of those things and keeping that sort of those safety things in place, then you're doing everything you can to keep yourself safe, and that then becomes a balancing act. And I think if you are worried about going out, the thing to do is to start by being in very big open spaces, not too far from home, places where you feel you can stay distant from people. Go to places that feel familiar and that feel comfortable for you. Don't go too far from home, so that if you feel anxious, you can go back home again. And I suppose the other thing is trying to kind of look at the news and look at things both on the television and online that kind of give you a sense of being back in the open space again and being out in the world again. So for example, have a look at news footage where they're going around shops, so that you get a sense of what those shops look like, so you don't get a sudden shock when you go back. So those are some aspects of advice for people who are nervous about going back out again. I think you can also maybe think about the positive things, so focus on the positives of going out. So at the moment we've got beautiful weather, so it's very pleasant outside, but also very good for us. I mean, moving around, exercise is good for us. Sunlight's really good for vitamin D levels, which is good for our immune system. So there are good reasons and positive reasons to be outside as well. So I think focusing on the reasons why you are out and so on can be really helpful. So those are some things that I think are responses to people who are nervous about going out. But the other question, and I'll read it for you more specifically, is I've just received a call that I've got to stay in lockdown until the end of June. I've had enough and I just want to leave the house and go to the shops myself. Do you have any suggestions of what I can do to get through this? So I think we've touched on some of this already, in the sense that, so there are rules about what we can and can't do, and then there is guidance, and these are separate things. So I think to some extent it's important for you to make the decision based on the evidence and based on what you can gather from people. And if you're unsure, then maybe speak to other people who you feel might have the expertise. But to make that decision about when it is okay to go out. So I have seen lots of older people out and about, wandering around the parks, all keeping really good distance with people, and being out and about in a safe way. So for some people, they are making that choice to do that. However, the question I think was specifically about shops, and shops are probably the place where it's kind of less safe to be out and about. So, and I think actually the thing about going to the shops is partly because it's a social space. We quite often chat to the cashier and we catch people's eyes, and you might chat over the cheese or whatever. So that I think something about going shopping is about the social space, but actually it's also about just doing normal things. And most importantly, it's about having that agency and autonomy to make your own choices about what food you have. Even if you are being really well looked after and people are bringing you some really nice food round, I guess it's never the same as being able to choose that yourself. I've just seen another question come in, which I'll respond to in just a second. So I think the thing about shopping is very particular, and I think it is about agency and choice. So I've thought about this quite a lot because a few people have asked me about this, and one of the things that I have suggested to people is that they find ways of trying to at least make those choices themselves, if it's at all possible. So for example, if you are having somebody do your shopping for you, then maybe being writing your own list and being as specific as you can about what you get. Maybe many of you are doing that already. Maybe for some of you it's just simply not possible, but I think that can at least give you a sense of ownership back. So I know in some cases people have had families who are delivering food and it's been fantastic, and in the early stages it was really kind of great to just have the food, and then actually it starts to get, after a while you start to think, but I want the food that I would choose. I want to be the one that goes and looks at which block of cheese I want to choose and makes my own choice about which tin of tomatoes I like the best, and so on. And I think that is really getting tricky for people. So just to go back to that question, I think there are things that are maybe very specific to the sort of things like shopping and so on. But I also think that some of it is about I've just realised the thing about doing this live streaming is that it does get distracting when questions come in, but I will come back to those in a second. I think the other thing is to go back to how to get through this, because I think that's the hardest thing at the moment, is people thinking, how do I get through this? How do I kind of come out the other side of this? It just seems like such a long time away when I've kind of been in already too much myself. So I think it goes back to a lot of what I was saying earlier on about finding really present, engaging activities, things that you really enjoy doing, and trying not to think too much about, you know, how it's, I guess one of the it's a bit like when you're a child and you go on a walk and you're kind of going, am I there yet? Am I there yet? Am I there yet? And you spend so much time kind of wondering how long you're going to be having to do this walk and how long is it going to go on for. And the more you're thinking about that, it's a bit like a watch kettle, you know, never boils. And I think that there's something here with time scale. So if June suddenly seems like too far away, or the time that you have to stay in suddenly feels like too far away, one of the things to do is to try not to think too much about it. I know it's really hard, but just try to take each day at a time. And one of the questions that came in is, if we're feeling anxious, should we avoid watching the news? Short answer, I think, is yes. I think there's everything at the moment is COVID-19. All the news, all the programs, so much of what's on is about this virus, and it can really make people very anxious. So my sort of short answer to that is that if you're feeling anxious, don't watch the news so much. The slightly longer answer is that I think it's very important to stay in touch with what the guidelines are and to know how to keep ourselves safe. So I think it's important to kind of stay in touch with what's going on at the moment. But if it's making you anxious, and this is not just at the moment, this is generally, I mean, the news is deliberately there to draw viewers. There's a lot of research that shows that people who engage in too much news, and not just actually on the TV or the radio or in the papers, but sometimes when something terrible happens, people have a tendency to then sort of read and start kind of following every link they can online, and to try and chase it up as much as they can. But actually we know from all the research that it generally makes people feel worse. So it really is sometimes about having just stepping away from it and doing something normal, something that you enjoy and something fun, and, you know, coming back to it at a later stage. So I've seen one comment on there that says laughter is the best medicine. That is true. Actually, it's an interesting thing because I've not talked about that very much. But actually, comedy is very like music. A lot of the research is showing that comedy has a lot of similar effects to music. So instead of kind of looking at listening to old music, watching old comedy can be really fantastic. And one of the reasons that that's really good is that, first of all, we kind of feel familiar with that, the kind of older comedy. But another really interesting thing about comedy is it's about social connection again. And social connection is something that most of us are missing. And both music and comedy offer a really unique type of social connection. And again, going back to old comedy, or comedy maybe that was around in your teenage years, that again seems to be the best place for people to go, because it's usually funnier to us, just like the music from that time is more emotional to us. I'm just trying to think if there were any other questions that I had, or any other specific things that I was going to add. Yeah, there were a couple of extra things that I was going to say. So one of the things that might help people deal with the kind of frustration of being isolated, as well as finding every way you can to socially connect and to feel, you know, that people are out there. Another thing that can sort of really help people is to find very small things to achieve. So it doesn't have to be anything major at all. It could be something as simple as sorting out the sock drawer. But a bit like kindness, what we know is that people tend to feel happier and more content when they feel like they've achieved something. And the other thing is to make a note of having achieved those things, you know, to set yourself a small goal and to achieve that goal and reach that goal. And again, this comes back to time scale. So one of the things we need to do at the moment is to step out of this you know, the immediate present is okay, and the distant past and the distant future both are kind of okay. The worst bit is that kind of middle ground, that feeling of how much longer is this kind of same type of lifestyle going to go on. So this is why I keep encouraging people to do things that are very absorbing and give you a sense of achieving something right now, or something that takes you back a long way, so that we kind of stay away from that sort of middle ground that is very unclear at the moment. So I think it's really important for people to set very small goals for themselves and to carry out very small tasks or very small acts of kindness to themselves or to others, to go back to the kindness thing. And I know this is much easier said than done for many people, but to sort of look for things that you can feel grateful for. And it's a very simple technique, but it's been shown over and over again to help, and that's kind of writing down 3 good things at the end of every day. 3 good things that have happened today, 3 good things. Sometimes it can be really difficult, but they can be as small as you want. So the 3 good things tip works really, really well. And I think I had another thing I was going to say, but I can't remember what it was. So there's the 3 good things, 3 things to be grateful for. Oh yeah, the other thing is writing. I know I mentioned it earlier, but writing can be really, really helpful. So writing about something, can be writing poetry, it could be writing a story, it could be writing about something that happened to you, it could be something exciting and fun, or it could be something really mundane. But again, we know that writing things down, even if they're difficult, challenging things, can be really, really helpful for people. So you know, if you can't see somebody at the moment, then writing a letter to them can be really, really good way of feeling like you connect with them in a way that's different from other things like phone calls and so on. Okay, so I don't think we have any more questions at the moment. I'm just going to double check whether... Oh, hang on, it's a couple more just come in. Okay, so... I've got another one here. It's a very anxious time. I wake up in the middle of the night feeling anxious and I can't go back to sleep. What tips do you have? I mean, this is always a difficult one, because we know sleep's important. So if we wake up in the night, start feeling anxious, and actually what's weird about sleep is that once you've had even a 15-minute nap, it's much harder to go back to sleep. So if you've been asleep for a couple of hours, you've kind of topped up your sleep need a little bit. And you can think of sleep as being a bit of a sort of seesaw. So we have, as we go through, from the minute we wake up, as we go through the day, you've got a kind of little sleep monitor that starts gradually going up and up and up. And this is the thing that makes you feel tired. But at various points in the day, there'll be things that kind of counteract it. Like if you've done something, you know, been out and done something very with lots of exertion, or if you do something exciting, or if you have a cup of coffee, or if the lights are really bright, those things will kind of counteract it to some extent. But gradually through the day, this need for sleep just goes up and up and up and up and up, and eventually it will reach a point that you have to sleep. The thing with sleep is that it very quickly drops back down again, that kind of need for sleep. So if you get it right up to here and very tired, need sleep, and then you sleep for just 15 minutes, your need for sleep, or your desire to sleep, or your body's tendency to sleep drops down very quickly. So if we wake up in the middle of the night and we've already had a couple of hours sleep, the anxiety and the stress and the fear and the worry sometimes of even not going back to sleep is enough to counteract the rest of that kind of need for sleep, if you see what I mean. So they're battling each other all the time. Anxiety keeps you awake for good reason. We have to be awake if we're if we're in a jungle and a tiger might come to get us. It's really important to be awake. So anxiety keeps us awake. But this need for sleep is so fundamental that it will gradually overtake even anxiety. But once we've had enough sleep, the anxiety starts to win. It wins the battle. Think of it as a tug of war, with anxiety pulling one way and the need for sleep pulling the other. And eventually the need for sleep kind of takes over. But the anxiety will win once you've had a couple of hours sleep. So that's why when you wake up, having had a couple of hours sleep, feeling anxious, you just can't get back to sleep again. And the advice for this is always the same. I mean, all the evidence points to the same thing, which is to not even try. Maybe give it 20 minutes or so. You can try certain techniques while you're lying there. So there are certain things that people do, like sometimes people do number calculations, add 1 and 1, make 2, then add 2 and 2, make 4, 4 and 4, make 8, and any kind of really repetitive mathematical technique. Some people like to maybe work their way around the countries of the world or the counties, and every time you feel yourself drift away from the task, keep coming back to it, and quite often something very, very mundane like that will help you sleep. But if none of those things work, the best thing to do is just to get up, read a book, try and stay in dim light, and then try again half an hour later, 45 minutes later, 20 minutes later, whenever you start feeling like you're starting to feel sleepy again. You have to just kind of walk away from it, because the harder you try to sleep in those conditions, the more you're fighting a battle and the more anxious you get, and so it goes round and round. So give it a go. Give the usual things, the breathing techniques, the muscle relaxation, the repetitive kind of cycle of things. Every time you feel yourself, the anxious thoughts come back, you kind of go, oh, there they are, there's those anxious thoughts, and you bring yourself back to the mundane task. Try that for 20 minutes or so. If you don't feel like you're getting anywhere, just get up and do something else, and then come back and try again. I'm just going to check what the other question was. A lot of people are feeling very guilty about being a burden on other people and not being able to help themselves. So what can we do about this? Well, I guess, I mean, as someone who's kind of halfway between old age and being a baby, I tend to think that the older people are, the more they've done for everybody else in the world, the more they've done for all the generations below them. And so for me, as someone who's not in that age group, it horrifies me to think that people do feel guilty, because most people of that generation have already done so much for the world and for us. So, I mean, I know that's easier said than done, but my first instinctive reaction to that is to change the perspective. So instead of thinking about the feeling guilty and feeling a burden, remember that actually for most of your life you've been doing things that contribute to society and that help other people, and I'm sure that when you were 20, if there was an older person in need for whatever reason, you'd have helped them. So I think first of all, changing that perspective is really, really important. The other thing is, I think, to recognize, I think, that what we talked about right at the beginning, that when people do something for you, it actually makes them feel good. So although people are feeling like a burden, actually my experience at the moment is that most people who are doing something for somebody else, it's really giving them a sense of purpose and of usefulness, and it's really, really doing people the world of good to be able to help people at the moment. I've found it so heartwarming to see the joy on people's face that they have been able to, for example, take some food round to somebody. I think the hardest thing is that many people who are currently shielded, who are currently being asked to try and stay away from shops and stuff, are the people that want to be helping others. And I think that's the hardest thing. So number one, I don't think people should feel guilty. I think we should change our perspective and think about it's kind of your turn in a way. And if the tables were reversed and this was affecting children worse than it was affecting older people, then all of the older generation would be doing everything they could to support the younger generation. So it's just the way this particular virus works that means it's this way round. But if it was the other way round, we all know that that you would be doing that. Secondly, many of you have just, as I say, been contributing for absolutely ever and done so much already. But I think also recognising that allowing people to help is actually a really nice thing to be able to do. And then I guess thinking about other ways that you can support and help people. And that's one of the questions I've been asked a lot is, I feel so helpless. I'm being a burden on people, but also I feel like I'm having to help them. I'm unable to help them. And I guess in those circumstances, again, it's just looking for ways that you can. There are still things that people can do. Writing a letter to somebody, if you're somebody that has got money, then maybe paying into a charity and supporting a charity so that you can help people in that way. If you're somebody that can sew, then maybe making some masks or doing other sort of fundraising type activities. So I think there are opportunities to kind of contribute, and it's looking to try and find what those are. But I also think that people should sort of try and accept that we all kind of, we are one big society and we are all supporting and helping each other. Just checking. I think that's all the questions I've got. I'm just checking whether there's anything else on here. Okay, I'm just going to double check my notes to see whether there was anything else that I wanted to make sure that I had said. Oh, I think I just want to maybe wrap up, and I mean, unless any more questions come in the next minute, I want to kind of wrap up with going back to the kindness theme again. And I think, as I've just acknowledged, I know that it's very difficult for some people at the moment to do things that are kind because they don't feel like they're able to go out and about and do things. But actually, as I mentioned at the beginning, kindness includes just listening to somebody, just letting somebody else talk and listening to them and taking an interest in somebody. But all sorts of other things, making a call to somebody, sharing something with them, putting something in the post, all of these little things, they're all little acts of kindness. But it's also about being kind to ourselves. And so I wanted to finish with 3 tips really. So in terms of how you can kind of tap into this kindness thing, one thing that you might want to have a look at is something called loving kindness meditation. Some of you might feel like that sounds a bit hippie-ish, but actually some really, really good evidence that it works. So have a look on YouTube. There's loads of stuff on there to try it out. And it can be really good. And it's a way of kind of thinking about kindness and being kind to others, but also being kind to yourself, most importantly. The second thing I've already mentioned is about expressing gratitude. So recognizing the things to be grateful for, but also really making an effort to express gratitude to others, which I'm sure everybody is doing, but this is something that we know, again, really makes a difference from a research point of view. And I think the final thing to just bear in mind is that kindness inspires kindness. So if people are kind to us, we want to be kind back to them. So I think taking this theme from the Mental Health Foundation of kindness, it's about looking for the smallest ways that we can do things that are kind to others or kind to ourselves, and recognizing that it kind of just flows out, that kindness spreads. And I've seen so much amazing kindness in the last couple of months. I found it very, very touching, and I think it's really a really positive thing to hang on to. This time at the moment feels like it's, for some people, like it's going on forever. It feels disconcerting. It's anxious. It provokes anxiety. It's quite, I think, disturbing and debilitating to people. I know, for example, children not being able to go to school is very disruptive. There's lots about it that's really difficult, but there's also lots of really wonderful stuff that's happened. People have really come together and reached out and done so much nice stuff for each other. And I think we really need to hang on to that kindness and that the giving that people are doing and the sharing. And we need to recognise that doing it is good for us and receiving it is good for the people who are doing it. So being able to take those gifts really of people that people are giving to you. So if people are doing things for you, it's kind of realising that it's like they're giving you a gift, and it feels great to give someone a gift just as it feels good to receive it. So accepting that gift and giving them the joy that comes with being able to do that, to help you. And I think the most important thing is to bear in mind that it feels like forever for some people at the moment, but it isn't. This will pass. You know, when you look right across history, there have been so many things that have happened. It will pass. And at the times when you feel that it's not going to pass, just be present. Just engage in something that just takes you away from the worry and the anxiety, and just do something that really immerses and engages you, something that you really enjoy and really takes up your kind of brain capacity and stops you thinking about other things. Okay, I'm going to finish there. I think we've done about 45 minutes. So thank you very much. I know that some people are going to watch back later. But yeah, thank you very much. And I hope that some people have found this useful. So I will stop there.